Who is one stranger you remember to this day? My sophomore year in college, I would always see this older man on my walk to my math class. He always went out of his way to said good morning and ask how I was doing that day. We never exchanged names, just two people checking in on each other. The girl on my running route who asked if she could run with me sometime, and I said sure and didn't give her my number or get hers. I was waiting at the subway station when I hear a man approaching, bopping his body as he sang "Watch Me Do Me, Watch Me Do Me." After exchanging pleasantries, he looks to the gloves I was wearing. He proceeds to take one off my hand, saying, "Ooh wow, those are nice gloves. Are those suede?" He takes the glove to his face and takes a deep sniffing inhale, gives it back saying, "Yeah, that's suede. Nice, nice." He then looks over my shoulder toward the station security guard, takes a small step to the right so I'd block him from view, and pulls a bottle of vodka from his jacket. With the biggest grin on his face, takes a huge pull and again bops off into the night singing "Watch Me Do Me, Watch Me Do Me." 10 out of 10 would watch him do him again. I was waiting for my mom to finish the paperwork to adopt my first dog when I was 4. I looked at a random lady in the waiting area and told her I was going to have a puppy and pointed at the dog. She said, "What will you name her?" I told her I didn't know. She said, "Well, she's very fluffy." A muffin is fluffy. Why don't you name her Muffin? I smiled at her and walked away to tell my mom. I had my dog Muffin until I was 17, and I'll never forget the nice lady who gave me her name. I was in a bad car wreck in Boston. I crawled out of the other side of the car and had a panic attack on the side of the busy road. A crowd of people came over to help me, but this one woman stroked my hair and gave me her drink until I calmed down. It sounds weird, but it was exactly what I needed at that moment. My sister and I were in middle school at the time, eating mall food with our mom. Mom decides to get a couple things from the food mart real quick as we're eating and goes to do so. We were in view of the window so she could just look over and see us. Sister and I noticed an old couple at another restaurant. They looked like they were mad dogging us while we were eating. Made me uncomfortable, but I tried ignoring them. My mom popped back out for a moment to check on us. And now the old couple started to throw their own food away and head out. My mom then headed back in to finish shopping. The wife patted her husband's shoulder, pointed back at me and my sister, and they both sat back down and continued watching us. They finally left when they saw our mom at the checkout, and my sister and I simultaneously went, "Oh, they were watching over us this whole time. Thanks. Wherever you guys are, not enough people like you too." One time, I went to the gum wall in Seattle. My friend put his chewed gum on the wall, and this guy came up behind him, plucked it off the wall and started chewing it. He told my friend, "Any gum you put on the wall is mine." He didn't even look like a crazy homeless guy. He was well groomed and wearing a suit. Never been more unnerved in my life. And I was just an onlooker. Great question, and it triggered a memory I haven't thought of in years. When I was 18, I moved to London. Didn't know anyone and used to spend my free time wandering around the city. One night I was probably out too late and in the wrong part of town. Got beaten up pretty bad and ended up in hospital. The next day a man arrived with my wallet that was taken during the beating. He must have stayed talking to me for 2 hours. Just general chat and asking me how I ended up like this. About my family, home place, etc. It was the most company I had had since I moved there, and it was at a time I really needed some human contact, and I think he knew that. I did thank him, but he probably didn't realize just how much I needed him there that day. A few years ago, I was waiting to buy a drink at a concert, and this Russian guy next to me said something to me. I responded. He instantly realized that I was American, and suddenly starts yelling, "You're American. You're going to my daughter." I calmly reassured him that I was not, in fact, trying to get with his daughter. He seemed satisfied with that, then handed me a shot of really bad vodka and disappeared. I think about that guy a lot. I also feel bad for whoever eventually gets with his daughter. I was really drunk trying to find my way back to a friend's new house after we got separated, walking back from the bar. I was in a dress and heels with no coat in the middle of a Canadian winter. A guy was randomly walking and noticed how drunk I was and offered to help me find my friends. He stayed with me all night, walking at first and then driving in his car until I sobered up, trying to find my friend's house. I didn't have my cell phone on me and no money. It could have turned out a lot worse. He gave me a pair of pants and a jacket, and when I finally sobered up around 8 a.m. I realized that my friend's house was on the street behind his house. Thank you, kind stranger, for staying with me and making sure nothing happened to me. When I was a kid, there was a man who would hang out at the side of the playground. Not because he was being a creeper, but because he was really far into special needs and he had a mind of a child. He would stand there as the kids went running by and blurt out, "Hi, I am Larry." He did this for all 5 years of grade school. I think about him often, to be honest. He was so happy, yet all he wanted to was play with us when we would play kickball or whatever, but wasn't allowed to step onto the playground. The one 6th grader, when I was in 8th, he asked me if I was his dad. I'm female, I said yes, and the kids with him started cheering. Overweight guy was ordering in front of me at Subways. Literally mid-sentence he stops, mutters to himself, "What am I doing?" and walks out. When I took an abacus course back in primary school, it was my first day and I did not know I had to wear my school uniform for class. So I dressed casually. I freaked out. I had anxiety issues when I was younger and had a panic attack outside the classroom when I saw my course mates in uniform. A kind lady took me aside to calm me down and coaxed me into taking the class. And she disappeared after she made sure I entered the classroom and sat down. I still remember snippets of the day, but I couldn't figure out who the lady was. A course coordinator, perhaps. All I know is that she went out of her way to take me aside and comforted me. Was in an Uber in Austin a few months ago, and my driver was this super chill ex-hippie dude that was forced to flee WA because he ratted out a crime syndicate or something. So then he moved to CA and sold shoes while not actually having an actual residence. He would just flirt with the women that would come into the store and shack up with them for a while until they got sick of him. This was like the 70-80th cess. Then he meets this one girl who he crushes on real hard, but she calls him a man slut and wants nothing to do with him because yeah, facts he is. They become best friends. She watches him go through relationship after relationship, and one day they joke about moving to Alaska to sell ice. Apparently that's a thing. And they've been married ever since. Now they have a bunch of boys in college at UT. I was in Austin for 6 hours, but this dude made my week with his storytelling. I was walking down the street in New Orleans and a guy the first never saw before was walking down the same street in the other direction, towards me. He saw me, nodded, reached out his hand for a high five. It was good vibes, and made me really happy. My credit card got declined at Subway and the lady behind me paid for my sandwich. I thanked her profusely, and then sat down and almost cried. This was months and months ago, but I'll always be grateful for her kindness. I was at a baseball game and I was seeing my favorite team. We were the away team. I'm standing there and a guy turns around and asks if I'm a fan of the away team. I say yes, and he hands me an autographed baseball card of one of the pitchers. He says he got it signed that day when he ran into the pitcher, but he doesn't want it because it's not his team. Neighbor from the corner in my old neighborhood. My brother and I were playing catch outside with our football while he was sitting in his garage. He saw I couldn't throw well and came over to us. He showed me how to throw the ball. Thanks to him I became better at throwing and went on to play for the school as QB. When I got my driver's license I drove to one of my old friends to meet up with others' friends and catch up. But when I arrived I realized he lived on the street of my childhood. After some time we went outside to play some football and saw my old neighbor again. I called a timeout and walked up to him to thank him for, since I would have never gone to go play football if it wasn't for him. A girl named Rose. She was a super shy 7-year-old girl with cancer. I got to hang out with her at her outdoor camp for one of the days we were both there. After a couple of hours, she began to open up. She never let loose like a child would, but stayed very reserved and told me about the things she could still enjoy doing. At 7 years old, she had read every Harry Potter book. For the rest of the day, I listened to her talk about nothing but Harry Potter. I'm not big on Harry Potter, but it was one of the best days of my life. When I was like 5 I attached to a guy's leg thinking he was my father. I will never forget his confused face. This Indian dude who worked in a convenience store just down the road from where I live. I went there with my cousin one time just to pick up some snacks and alcohol. We asked him what we should buy. He picks up this bottle of super strong stuff. My cousin says, "Oh my god, I'm not trying to die." He responds with, "It's good when you die, you know." His Indian accent made it sound pretty funny. I was low-key creeped out at first, until he started talking about how he had a near-death experience on LSD, and how he takes all kinds of psychedelics, sometimes even when he's on shift. For some reason I felt really sad for him. Even though he seemed like a super happy guy, I sometimes wonder where he is now and how he's doing. I like this question. I was studying abroad in England and near the end of the year, shortly before I was scheduled to return home, I traveled to Ireland with a friend. On the way back, there was a miscommunication and security issue that resulted in me missing my flight, spending the rest of my money to the point of overdrafting on a return flight, waiting 11 hours, and getting back to England around 2 a.m. At the Birmingham airport, I realized my cheap phone had died and was basically looking like a lost puppy at the taxi queue. A taxi driver waved me over and asked if I needed a ride. So I explained my situation and he said if I had a contact back at the university who could cover for me. Thankfully my friend I had traveled to Ireland with was waiting and informed of the situation up to the point of my earlier departure. The driver said he'd take care of it and drove me the 45 minutes or so back to the university. Stopping for gas, I didn't have to pay for this, as I expected, bought me some snacks, and generally was very wholesome as we talked about our families and our times in England, as he was from Pakistan and was getting used to the country and supporting his family there. We had a great discussion the whole trip, and when we got to the university, he found my waiting friend and said he was only going to charge me 1/4 price, which I gave back to her as soon as I could. Mr. Pakistani taxi driver was one of the friendliest people I met in Europe, and I have no idea what I'd have done if he hadn't waved me over to talk at the airport. Thanks to him, I've been more mindful of strangers' unique circumstances in their daily actions. I was at a parking lot at a beach in Texas. I'm walking out and this car slows down and stops next to me. An old man is driving. He asks, "Do you see a cat around anywhere?" I immediately think he's missing a cat, but then he goes on, "I just ran over a cat, took its tail clean off." Now I'm starting to get a little creeped out, but it's okay. I'm heading to Walmart. You know why? WTF. Largest retailer in the world. Dude couldn't hold it in anymore and just started cracking up. His wife is in the passenger seat just shaking her head. Then they just drive away. I finally get the joke and can't stop laughing. To this day it's one of the best executed jokes I've been witness to. Thanks oldster, wherever you are. Gave a Lyft ride to a passenger and drove him deep into the desert, almost exactly between Phoenix and Tucson. He didn't say a single word the whole ride. Asked me to pull over on the highway, middle of nowhere, dead of night, very few cars passing. Grabbed his bags and said, "I think I want to try human flesh today." I 0 to 100. Out of there. I wonder what he did there. Why he wanted off there. There was nothing for miles. So many questions. But he creeped me out so much. The Asian man that high-fived me for wearing a Jordan hoodie, screamed at performer at my work while he was playing, and who hugged me and told me I was really tall. He was a strange dude, but I'll never forget him. I was in Chicago for vacation one summer. There was a man on the street corner drawing on some cardboard pieces. The drawings were amazing and I figured he was homeless, so I asked if I could buy one of his drawings. He told me no and gave me one. He wanted nothing in return. His face and smile is always with me. When I was in 6th grade, some random adult stopped me in the street and asked me if I was a boy or a girl. Totally screwed up my self-esteem, and I remember it crystal clear to this day. Was it Professor Oak? About 15 years back I helped an old lady I met on the bus carry her groceries to her apartment. It was completely crawling with roaches and there were actual buckets of shit around the place. To this day I think of her and hope that somehow her life got better. This one guy was from Spain and in America for New Year's. He asked me for the Wi-Fi password to the Starbucks so he could call his family. I didn't know it, so I turned on my phone's hotspot and got to hear him speak a language I couldn't understand. He was really appreciative and we got talking about New Year's cultural traditions. I told him it was tradition in America to down a shot for every second of the 10 for the ball drop. To this day I wonder if he ever found out that I lied to him. A girl from 9th grade in 7th period during December who said at 3:05 that my eyes looked nice. There was this one super cute girl who I saw on campus all the time my freshman year. We never talked but she smiled at me every day. She'll never know but she was the best part of most of my days. It was a tough year emotionally and she made it better.